Sometime between the 29th of July and the 1st of August, somebody went around the town of Winona, Minnesota with a saw. Winona, that's resolving to 8. There are 8 automatic license plate cameras in Winona, or there were, and by the morning of the 1st, every single one of them had been cut off its pole and carried away. They weren't smashed or spray painted, they were taken. The police put out a statement on the 4th saying the cameras were gone and they did not know who had them. As far as I can tell, nobody has been arrested and the cameras have not turned up. Here's the detail that made me want to make this though. Look at where those 8 cameras were. Highway 61 at Bundy Boulevard, Highway 43 at Homer Road, Highway 14 at Knopp Valley Drive, and the junction where 61 meets 14. Every one of them is on a road in or out of town. Not the school, not the shops, not the bad corner where things actually happen, just the ways in and the ways out, which means Winona wasn't being watched so much as it was being sealed. Pups, miss, medicatizing, beer, medicatizing beer, Mona to the national view, counter-starting, medicatizing beer. And once you've seen that pattern in one town, you start wondering how many towns it's in. So I went and got the data and I counted them. Before anything else, I want to be precise about what this thing is, because the exaggerated version of it is what lets the industry wave the whole objection away. An automatic license plate reader is a camera on a pole, usually solar powered, usually about the size of a shoebox, pointed at a lane of traffic. When a car goes past, it photographs the back of the car, reads the plate with software, and writes down 4 things. It writes down the plate, the time, the place, and what it calls a vehicle fingerprint, which is the make, the color, the body shape, roof racks, bumper stickers, damage. It is not facial recognition, and it is not reading your phone, and if somebody tells you it is, they're making the case easier to dismiss than it deserves to be. What it does is much more boring than that, and the boring version is the one that matters, because the boring version is a searchable record of where your specific car has been. Somebody at a keyboard types a plate and gets back a list of times and places. That's the product, and everything else in this video follows from that one sentence. So how many of these are out there? I went looking for the number, expecting to find it in about 4 minutes, and instead I found 4 numbers. About a year ago, a well-known repair shop guy called Louis Rossman put out a video, and the title said 30,000 cameras. Campaign material from the civil liberties side this year says over 40,000 in more than 5,000 American communities. Press coverage this summer says 120,000, capturing tens of billions of data points a month. 30, 40, 120, and I want to flag something about that last one straight away because it's the biggest number and it's the one that gets repeated. The 120,000 figure counts plate readers, asterisk and asterisk pan tilt zoom cameras together. And a pan tilt zoom camera is a different thing that does a different job. If you quote 120,000 as the number of plate readers, you're inflating it, and I'm not going to do that. So the honest situation is that the 3 published figures come from the company or from people arguing about the company, and they disagree with each other by a factor of 4, which is annoying enough that I decided to just count them. 450, 95, 50, 95, 90, 105, 95, I to 95, meternes, hershåndet, pendum, södund, nintund, meternet, pendum, betend, meterndet, pand, etefundis in far, no betum, meternet, abab, betend, send, pentur, metend, pesend, metern, abab, metend, and, matens, matter, fo, metend,
Met Hunter Tinto Measant Tambis Adat Danda Danet Measant Decent Tambis Panda Not Tinto a Basant Kanta Basant Clothes Adan Tanda Sat Babis Paw Adat Santa Datan Ta So.
There is a public map of these things. Volunteers have been walking around American towns, photographing camera poles and logging them into OpenStreetMap, which is the open mapping project that a lot of the world's map data quietly runs on. Anyone can query it. So I did in about 150 overlapping boxes covering the country, and I pulled down every node tagged as a surveillance device of type license plate reader. That's what's on the map as of the day I made this, and I want to be careful about what that number is and isn't. So it's not every camera in America, because it only contains what somebody bothered to log. It's a floor, not a ceiling. It also isn't only one company's cameras, which is why I'm not going to keep saying one brand name at you. What it is the first count in this video that doesn't come from somebody with a position. Here's the thing I wasn't ready for. You'll have to rise to that things. When you plot 100,000 of these on an empty screen, you don't need to draw the country, because the cameras draw it for you, and they draw it well enough that you can pick out the coastline without a single border on the image. That's Florida hanging down on the right. That's the Gulf running west into Texas. That's the Great Lakes. And that long, dense smear going up the right-hand edge is the Northeast Corridor from Washington to Boston. And over on the left, you can see Puget Sound and the whole California coast picked out in yellow. Nobody drew any of that. Every dot is a pole that somebody physically bolted to the ground. And between them, they have traced the shape of the United States, because the cameras go where the people go and where the roads go and where the money is, which turns out to be the same map. Then I broke it down by state, and the spread is much wider than I expected. Texas has the most by a long way, at 14,513 on this map. California is second at 8,124, which surprised me given how much bigger its population is. Georgia has 7,934, which for a state of 11 million is a genuinely remarkable density. Illinois, Florida, and Ohio are all in the 6,000s, and after that it falls away fairly quickly through New York, Michigan, Indiana, Tennessee, Missouri, and Virginia in the 3s and 4s. And then you get to the bottom of the table, and the bottom of the table is the part of this video that's actually useful to somebody deciding where to live. Montana has 17, not 17,000, 17 cameras on the whole map in a state of 147,000 square miles, which works out at roughly one plate reader for every 8,500 square miles of Montana. Vermont has 31, Wyoming has 32, Maine has 57, and New Hampshire has 60. Set that against Texas at 14,500, and you are looking at a difference of about 850 times between the top of this list and the bottom, in the same country under the same federal law, with no national policy on any of it. Now I have to be careful here, and this is the caveat that matters most in the whole video. This is a volunteer map. A state can be near the bottom because it genuinely has very few cameras, or because nobody living there has walked around logging them, and from the data alone I cannot tell those two situations apart. Montana is a big empty state with a small population and not many mappers in it, and some of that 17 is almost certainly undercounting. What I'd say is that the gap between 17 and 14,000 is far too large to be explained by mapping effort alone, and that if you are the kind of person who has been thinking about this the whole way through the video, the shape of the answer is in the bottom 5 rows of that table, rather than the top 5. Remember Winona, 8 cameras, all of them on the ways in and out. Remember, I'll find out done, I'll never forget we patterned. That's not a Winona thing. Zoom into almost any town on this map and the same shape appears. The cameras aren't spread evenly across a place the way street lights are. They cluster on the arteries, on the state highway where it crosses the town line, on the exit ramp, on the bridge. And when you think about it for a second, that's obviously the correct engineering choice. If what you want is to know which cars entered and left, a camera in the middle of a residential street tells you about that street. A camera at the town line tells you about everybody. It also means something slightly uncomfortable, which is that the design intent isn't really watching a place, it's recording a boundary. The question the system is built to answer is not what happened, it's who came in. The thing that keeps nagging at me about all of this is the speed. 5 or 6 years ago, this network did not meaningfully exist, and the reason it exists now is not that some federal agency built it and rolled it out, which is the version people tend to imagine when they picture surveillance infrastructure. It got built one town council at a time by a private company selling a subscription, and it got sold as a crime tool at a price that sits comfortably inside a small municipal budget, which means that in an enormous number of places it never needed a debate to get approved at all. A camera in its pole runs at roughly $3,000, which is the figure the Winona reporting used when it added up what the theft cost the department. For a town, that is not a capital project. That is a line item, and a line item goes through on a consent agenda alongside the fire department's new hose and the contract for grass cutting at the cemetery, and nobody in the room thinks of themselves as having voted on a surveillance network because on the paperwork in front of them they haven't. Multiply that by 5,000 communities and you get a national system that nobody ever designed, assembled out of thousands of individually reasonable local purchases, each one of which was genuinely too small to argue about. That is also why the count is so hard to pin down, and why I ended up querying a volunteer map instead of reading a government figure. There is no federal register of these things. Nobody is required to tell anybody where they are. The most complete public record of the largest vehicle surveillance network in American history is a hobby project, and that sentence should probably bother you more than anything else in this video. There are two different things this system does, and people mix them up constantly, so it is worth separating them because almost all of the argument lives in the difference. The first one is the hot list, and the hot list is the part almost nobody objects to. A car gets stolen, the plate goes on a list, the cameras watch for it, and when it goes past one, the system alerts somebody. That is a machine doing what a police officer with a very good memory would do if you could station one at every entrance to town, and it is genuinely effective at the thing it claims to be effective at. The second one is the search, and the search is the whole ball game. The search is somebody sitting at a terminal typing in a plate that is on no list at all, belonging to a person accused of nothing, and getting back a history of where that car has been. The camera does not know the difference between those two uses. The poll does not care. The only thing standing between them is a text box where the person doing the searching types a reason and whether anybody ever reads what they typed, which is exactly what the Danville audit turned out to be a record of, because the reasons were right there in the log the whole time, written down by the people running the searches, and it took a public records request from outside the department for anyone to go and look at them. Numbers this big stop meaning anything, so here's a small one. In Virginia, a lawsuit alleges the police ran queries on one particular driver's plate 526 times in 4 months. 526 queries is about 4 times a day, every day, for a third of a year on one person who is not, as far as the filing goes, accused of anything at the time. That's what the system feels like from inside if somebody decides to point it at you. Not a dragnet, not a conspiracy, just a search box that's very easy to use, being used. Which brings up the part that I think is genuinely the story here, and it isn't the cameras, it's the queries. The cameras are dumb, They photograph everything that goes past. The interesting question has always been who gets to type in the box and what reason they have to give. In Danville, Illinois, a public records request pulled the audit logs for a year of searches, June of 2024 through May of 2025. In that year, there were more than 4,000 lookups where the stated reason was some version of immigration enforcement, immigration ICE plus ERO, ICE warrant. Illinois state law specifically prohibits using this data for immigration enforcement. The company's own policy prohibits it too. And the way around both of those turned out to be simple. The federal agency doesn't need an account if a local police department is willing to run the search and pass the answer along. In August of 2025, the Illinois Secretary of State ran an audit and found the company in violation of state law. I want to be careful here about what that does and doesn't show. It doesn't show a secret program. It shows a permission system where the permissions were written down, agreed, and then routed around by ordinary people doing their jobs. And the only reason anybody found out is that somebody filed a records request in one town in Illinois. Now, the part where I say the thing that doesn't help my case. The company says its network supported around 1 million law enforcement investigations in a year, and that it helped locate more than 10,000 missing people. Those are the company's own numbers, and you should hold them the same way you hold the camera counts, which is loosely. Even so, the direction is almost certainly right, because this is exactly the kind of tool that finds a car that a missing child was last seen getting into. And I'm saying that plainly because a video that pretends there's no upside here is lying to you, and because the honest version of the argument is harder and better. The question isn't whether the system ever does something good. It obviously does. The question is what it cost to have it, who decided that, and whether anybody was asked. Nobody in Winona voted on those 8 polls. There's one more thing the company says that's worth taking seriously, which is that the data doesn't stick around. By default, plate reads are hard deleted on a rolling 30-day cycle. It's enforced automatically by the storage system rather than by somebody remembering. The data sits in government cloud infrastructure, deletion events get written to a tamper-resistant log, and the whole control gets tested once a year by outside auditors. That is a real answer, and it's better than nothing, and I'd rather 30 days than forever. It also doesn't cover the thing Danville exposed. 30-day deletion governs the pile of photographs. It says nothing about what somebody copied out of that pile during the 30 days, or who they sent it to, or what they wrote down. The exposure in this system was never the storage, it's the search. So what happens when a town actually looks at this and decides against it? It happens more than I expected. There's a cancellation wave that's been running through this year with national coverage on it back in February, and it reached the Los Angeles Police Department, which decided not to renew. The racist, person dark. Person dark, person dark, institution dark, person dark, person dark, person dark, person dark, lenses. The pattern in the ones I read about is fairly consistent. A council signs a contract, often without much of a public conversation, because it's presented as a crime tool and it's cheap. Then a year or two later, somebody asks for the audit logs, and the conversation the town never had happens all at once in a council chamber. And then there's the other thing that happens, which is what happened in Winona. Reporting this month puts the running tally at more than 24 cameras destroyed across at least 5 states going back to April of last year. Cut down, sawn off, smashed, painted over. 2 more went missing off the Mississippi River Bridge in Buffalo County by the same method as the Winona 8. I'm not going to pretend to you that I think sawing down public equipment is a good way to settle a question about municipal procurement. It's a crime, the town pays for it, and the cameras go back up. What I'll say is that it's information. When people start physically removing infrastructure that was installed without a vote, The thing to notice isn't the sawing, it's that the vote never happened. Every episode ends the same way. Here's what I got wrong, or nearly did. 1. The cost of the Winona thefts. It went round as $40,000 on posts with tens of thousands of likes. The local reporting puts the cameras at about $3,000 each, and there were 8 of them, which is about $24,000. The viral number is high by about 2/3, and I had it in my notes as 40 before I checked. 2. 120,000 cameras. That figure counts plate readers together with pan-tilt zoom cameras, which are a different device. Quoting it as a plate reader count inflates it, and it's the number most likely to be repeated at you. 3. My own count. 104,895 is what's logged on a public map on one particular day. It's a floor. 37 of the boxes I queried timed out and returned nothing, so the true map figure is a little higher than what I'm showing you, and the true real-world figure is higher again by an amount nobody knows. The map I've been showing you isn't finished, and it never will be. It's built by volunteers walking around noticing polls, which means every dot on it is somebody who looked up. There were fewer yesterday, there'll be more next week. That's the whole thing, really. This is a system that got built in about 5 years in thousands of towns, mostly through consent agendas and municipal purchase orders, and the public record of how big it is doesn't exist anywhere official. The best count available is one that strangers made by hand. Next time on this channel, the towns that pay you to move there and what the contract says.